Hello and welcome to a special edition of Puck Talk with Pickens and Turner, the 30 Teams, 30 Thoughts edition, where a month into the season we take a look a little bit at each team in the National Hockey League. But of course, Pat, news that none of us wanted to hear. Of course, the big thing that's out there this morning, though, at the time of this recording, we don't know exactly what the injury is. But of course, Connor McDavid out for a while. It's a tough one just for the entire league to swallow, because for all the teams that we're going to get to host him when he comes into their building and just be able to watch his play and him develop, it's a tough one. But Pat, what are your initial thoughts on seeing this happen to a kid who was off to a really good start?
Well, the initial reports appear to be a broken collarbone, which we saw that with Patrick Kane last year at the end of the season, and it was like 12 weeks. So, I mean, I know he rebounded quickly. It was like 8 to 12 weeks, I think, or 12 to 15 weeks, I think was the initial prognosis, and he came back in like 10, which, I mean, Patrick Kane is an elite athlete, veteran. You have to think the Oilers are going to let that kind of sit and fester, or, they're going to be cautious with him because, he's the meal ticket. It's just really upsetting because we like to be neutral on people. We like to be neutral on players, but this kid has proven he's really special. He was the rookie of the month for October. He had 12 points in his first 12 NHL games. So he's a point per game player already. He's only 18 years old, and he's brought it. What he's brought is the excitement to Edmonton that's been lacking, and he's also kind of righted what's going on there a little bit. You said, I think, on last week's podcast that you thought he was just going to will them into playoff position, and in the Pacific Division, we'll get to that in a minute, it's possible, but he didn't score until his third game, so he had 12 points in 9 games in October, and then it was kind of it was a tough play. I don't think it's a dirty play to going in along the boards. You got hit, and you kind of hit a bad angle behind the net and caught it looked like his shoulder at first. But like I said, it sounds like the reports indicate that it's a broken collarbone. I guess if there is any silver lining to this, it's that it happened early enough in the season that at least he could rebound from it potentially. But man, this is just not. It's just really depressing.
Yeah, it is, and I think part of the reason why, for me, hearing this happen was an upsetting kind of thing, just because I feel like him being so young and so dynamic, that it was a situation. Look, the NHL is constantly trying to get recognized above the other sports, and I felt that him being so good and so dynamic already was actually something that could steal headlines from other sports, that the NHL could use him as just like Sidney Crosby was. That he would have been a guy who would have maybe, if he goes out and has a 4-point night, might have made SportsCenter for a change or something like that. American SportsCenter, not Canadian SportsCenter.
Yeah.
So I think just for that the NHL loses for a little bit of time now a guy that was generating more interest in the league. I just look at it from a league-wide idea that he is an ambassador for the league, even at 18 years old, because of how good he is.
Yeah, and it seems like he kind of found a rhythm with his with the line mates in Pouliot up there, and they brought in Draisaitl now to. I guess we'll get to the Oilers in a minute as far as their team is concerned, because if you watch them, they're even without McDavid for the last second half of that game Tuesday night against Philadelphia, they were still exhilarating to watch with Taylor Hall and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. And these guys are playing out of their minds right now. And you see the plays that have been being made with the addition of Draisaitl and the idea that Eberle is going to come back. But now, it's almost like he didn't right the ship as much as maybe Todd McClellan did. But like I said, it's one of those moments where he was capable of doing anything with the puck on his stick, even at 18, where you said, 3 points, 4 points. I mean, even 5 or 6 points were possible, where a guy does something that you've never seen before, and now it sounds like it's going to be at least a couple months. You have to think, which takes us to January and see where Edmonton's at. I can't imagine they're going to rush him and that they would want to be really cautious with him, right? You think so?
Yeah, I would think of more than anything. I mean, you're looking at this guy not even for a couple years down the road, but I mean, 20 years down the road.
Yeah.
If you really want to keep him, and I think rushing him back now and possibly re-injuring him or something and making it a chronic condition, which you never know.
Yeah.
Because there's muscles that get weakened when you are in a sling for a while, and that's something you have to look out for, at least medically. So I think they'll be smart and realize that the best is yet to come from him, and there's no reason to bring him back. But
yeah,
speaking of a team, of a team, we're going to start at the 30 for 30 right now. We're going to try to go through every team just about a minute or so and just give a little thought, because I think what's cool about it now is that there are storylines for every team and that there's been good and bad across the league. So instead of just working on a couple teams this week, I think it's cool just to kind of dive a little bit into each team. So we're going to start with the Montreal Canadiens here. Pat, I know this is a team that you're picking to go to the finals, and it just seems like right now that everything is going right for them, except for the player who maybe we both thought would be the guy that could make a big difference, which is Alexander Semin, who can't crack the lineup right now. What do you make of that?
First off, I agree with you. Lots going well. They're plus 25 goal differential. But you said it, and Semin hasn't played their last 4 games. He has 3 points. He was supposed to be a top line or a top shelf type winger to play with. I mean, that Pacioretty line, if they put Pacioretty with Plekanec, or if they put him with Desharnais and Gallagher, that line's been great. The problem is, if whoever's not on that line, they need, they need to get a second line goal scoring. And Dale Weiss has really been the guy so far, which is, it speaks for itself. You can't think that's sustainable. Carey Price carried that team to such heights last year, and now he's injured. And then Alex Semin, it really hasn't done anything. I kind of kept an eye on him a couple weeks ago just to kind of monitor, and he didn't look that bad to me. And it's one of those arguments where it's left to the eye of the beholder. I don't think he's been awful. There are people in Montreal who hate him, who probably want to waived and off the team. It's only a 1-year deal. I think we're still going to see Alexander Semin do something in Montreal, but it's a matter of when, I guess.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if he can crack that lineup at some point. I'm sure via injury he'll get back in.
Yeah.
All right, next team, we're going to go with the Ottawa Senators, who have been a bit of a pleasant surprise so far, actually. Mm-hmm. The young goal scoring seems to still be there. I mean, they are scoring goals. Defensively, they haven't been great, but we kind of knew that was coming. I guess the question really with them now is that can we expect this team to hang on and get one of these playoff spots? I don't think so, just because Tampa Bay, who we'll get to in a second, will probably pass them. But I think there are things to like in Ottawa, that if this is a team that maybe can make a move for a defenseman and shore things up a little bit there, that maybe they are a team that sticks around to the end. I think maybe surprising to all of us.
They remind me a little bit of Tampa Bay, just with all of the kind of upstart, surprising talent that they generated. The guys like Stone and Hoffman, and they have the star power in Kyle Turris, and Bobby Ryan was the big, the big ticket item that they went out and traded for. You mentioned it, the defense hasn't been there. Erik Karlsson's struggling a little bit. Craig Anderson's been fantastic, and that's why they are where they are right now. But they could be. They have the young offensive skill that they could be another Tampa Bay.
Yeah, they really could. And speaking of the original Tampa Bay, who is struggling out of the gate here this year, the Tampa Bay Lightning,
let's start, Dave, by saying we'd all like to struggle with 14 points.
Yes, I mean, maybe they're not struggling in terms of the Toronto Maple Leafs, which whatever about them, but Tampa Bay, a team that everyone thought it was going to be the next big thing in the NHL, that they were going to be the team that kind of shifts the west-east kind of thing. They haven't looked good yet. And again, it's really early and it's hard to say anything, because I think it is tough to get back on the horse after a grueling run that has you lose. I think it's hard to just come back and just get back at it. But the one thing that we've discussed off the air, I think the Stamkos thing has a little bit more of an effect on this team than anyone really realizes it does. Because, look, is he all in on this team? I don't know. Is the team worried about, they're going to get rid of him and what's it going to do? I think that being up in the air is in the back of their minds. Is it the reason why they're 6-6-2? Probably not, but I think it's part of it.
I think there's some issues. I think it might be a bit of the distraction. I just think there's a hangover effect right now for them. It's a short off season. It's a struggle to kind of fire yourself back up for that regular season, especially when you're getting everyone's best.
Yeah, absolutely. Next team now, the Boston Bruins. They were lost. They were dead in the water, it seemed at first, and now all of a sudden they've been better. I think everyone now is reminded how good of a player David Krejci is.
Yeah.
And defensively, they've been at least a little bit better. But Tuukka Rask himself is playing much better, which I think is a major part of it for them. I guess the question with this team now is the rest of that division doesn't look great. If you want to pencil Tampa Bay in as a number 2 seed just by default, is Boston the team that's going to get that 3 seed there?
I would say no. I don't think it's the defense. I don't think it's sustainable. You mentioned Krejci, and their top. You look at their top 2 lines, and they're really good. It's just a matter of if they can get any depth in scoring after the Krejci's line and after Bergeron's line. And if you look at them, their penalty kill has been just atrocious. They gave up 3 power play goals to Dallas on Tuesday night. And I think their penalty kill is like 70% right now, which is really not going to get it done. They're winning games on the road. We talked about it off air that they got to start winning games at home, and they're winning games on the road. They're 5-0 on the road, and without that, and without their top 2 lines, they would be falling out. I kind of think they're going to fall out of contention at some point. But good, that Matt Bolesky signing has really not. We everybody thought it would be a complete bust, and he has 5 points in 9 games, so it's not been awful, but something to keep an eye on going forward.
No doubt. And another team that has struggled a little bit, and maybe this is the year that they miss the playoffs. I hate saying that because we're always, always, always wrong. The Detroit Red Wings, they have found a hometown kid to come in. Dylan Larkin, who grew up about, I think, less than an hour outside of Detroit in Clarkstown, Michigan. He's 19 years old. He has 9 points, 4 goals, 5 assists in 12 games. He's plus 10. It's just typical Red Wings, right? That they're able to find a kid. I mean, sure, usually they're used to finding Europeans, but in this case, it's an American kid. And he's come out and he's been great. And it just seems like with the Red Wings, they always are able to find someone else to kind of take the load of the team. And you see Zetterberg playing well, but we know he's towards the end, and all of a sudden now you have Dylan Larkin coming up, and he looks like he could be the guy in the future there.
Yeah, no question about it. There's really not much not to like about them. Plus, you look at that, they put Sheahan with Tatar and Nyquist, and Sheahan scores a goal on Tuesday night against Tampa Bay. I think the big question is still in goal, whether it's Howard, whether it's Mrazek. 31 goals allowed in 12 games, really, almost 3 goals a game.
Jimmy Howard's been good, though.
In that Atlantic division, that's good enough for third best, 31 goals in 12 games. Howard, I like him as a player, or as a goaltender. It's just whether he's going to hang on to that position. I mean, I guess maybe you could make the case that last year was kind of the lost year for them. But, maybe with a challenge with Mrazek behind him, they're giving him. It's just, to me, it's more the matter of does Blatchel trust him, and does the organization trust him? I know 934 and 2.10 are really great numbers, but all of a sudden last year Peter Mrazek's starting playoff games, and you just wonder whether they're going to let him go a little bit, so to speak.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where they go with the goaltending as the year goes on.
Yeah.
Florida Panthers, of course, they're off to a pretty decent start. They're another team that I think is absolutely going to hang around for that 3 seed in the division. They've looked good at times, and they're, again, a young team that I think their best is still yet to come. I know you and I were both kind of saying that last year, and it's even true this year. Though Jágr has been good up until the point that he got hurt. Vincent Trocheck has been really good now. Nick Bukestad has shown some nice things. Barkov has shown some nice things. It's funny how Jonathan Huberdeau, who is supposed to be maybe the best out of all of them, has struggled. He doesn't have a goal yet. But you're seeing these these young guys starting to figure it out and playing some pretty good hockey now. I think this team is only going to continue to get better as the year goes on.
I agree. It's just a matter, to me, it's more a matter of if anyone's going to notice them, because, they're just kind of, flying below the radar. 32 goals in 11 games, almost 3 goals a game. They've given up the fewest goals in the Atlantic, tied for second fewest with the Rangers in the Eastern Conference. And there they go, flying below the radar. No one seems to know. No one's going to their games. And they've also played the fewest games in the Eastern Conference. So that's why they're in 6th place right now. But I think Jágr has been a stabilizing influence. I think Luongo and their defense is just really good, and they play that defensive style. So, I really like – I picked them to be a playoff team before the year, and there's no reason to believe they won't be as of the first month of the season.
Yeah, it's funny how they're still getting good production out of Brian Campbell, even as he gets up there in age.
He's like the elder statesman.
He continues to be solid, but now a team that's a little bit younger, the Buffalo Sabres, they've been playing better hockey lately. They're 5-7 now. Still a lot of work to do, but they've kind of seemed like they've maybe started to find out a little bit about themselves with all the new stuff that's there. And, of course, Jack Eichel being Jack Eichel. He's been so good at times already. But another guy who I think you have to talk about is Ryan O'Reilly. He has 13 points in 12 games. He's got 4 goals, 9 assists. He was a guy who they brought in to be a big-time number 1 center, and so far he's been every bit of that.
I agree. I think a lot of – and nobody wants to hear this, but given it's pretty par for the course for Buffalo sports, they've been really unlucky this through the first month of the season. They're leading the league in shots per game. They're 33 shots per game they're averaging. They lost Robin Lehner on the first night of the season, and Chad Johnson's been starting the brunt of the games, and he's been awful. He's .881 save percentage, 3.16 goals against average in 9 games. I mean, so he's starting – he has started just about every game since Lehner went down, and he's not been very good. I mean, the defense might have something to do with that. They've got some youngsters on their blue line. But, I mean, if you look at that team – they're generating shots. They're not generating goals. So those 33 shots per game have only led to 28 goals in 12 games. Not very good. And they've been porous in goals. So I just think a lot of it has to do with luck. They're going to get Leonard back here soon. And they own the Philadelphia Flyers. If they could play the Flyers every night, they'd be a playoff team. They probably would be the President's Trophy winner. But it's just a matter of if they're going to get goaltending, and they also need to bank some points here. Losing games, they haven't lost a game in overtime yet. They're the only team in the Atlantic that hasn't. So they're not stealing points in that way. It's early, obviously, and they're not great, but I think they've been unlucky. They also had some goals disallowed. They had a goal disallowed in a game against on opening night with the goalie interference penalty, a questionable goalie interference call. So I think I think we're only going to see them improve as the season goes on.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I think that they will be a team that is close to possibly getting back into playoff contention, though I don't think they will. Okay, So the last team in this division here, the Toronto Maple Leafs, not much to say here other than the fact that this is a team that has a lot of rebuilding to do. The ticket prices are still exorbitant, and they're not doing much. I guess maybe the only thing that you can really feel good about is James Reimer, who's been decent, considering that he doesn't have a ton of defense in front of him. Really, the question becomes, we've heard the Dion Phaneuf rumors for a while. He's actually been decent this year.
7 assists.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he gets traded and they can start to bring in a good haul of young guys and kind of hit the rock bottom that they need to hit, which I guess for some Leafs fans, the idea that they haven't hit rock bottom yet is scary. But whatever the case may be, I think they should trade Dion Phaneuf just to try to really hit the reset button and start to stockpile young bodies like we're seeing other teams doing.
That was the interesting thing. Everybody talked about how glaring and obvious it was that the Leafs were rebuilding based on the Kessel trade, but that was their only move of the offseason. They didn't really. I mean, they basically went into this season with the same roster, just minus arguably one of the 5 best goal scorers in the world. So it wasn't exactly pushing the reset button. You read Twitter, you hear reports, and I mean, I don't know how true they are given, knowing the nature of Lou Lamoriello, that, everyone's available and that trades can be made and that everything is everyone's good. But if you look at it, you mentioned it, their goaltending has just been awful. And Jonathan Bernier has basically sabotaged their year right now. You mentioned Reimer. Reimer's only at 908, but he had 43 saves in a win against Dallas. Johnny Bernier doesn't have a win yet. He's given up 19 goals on 189 shots. That's not even a 900 save percentage. And he's played more than 376 minutes of ice time. I mean, their goaltending's been an abomination.
Yes.
And they're just, they're not a good enough team to overcome porous goaltending. And I actually like Bernier. I thought he was pretty good, but I might be dead wrong on that because, Reimer's not a starter, a number 1 starter in this league. And John Bernier is making him look like one.
Yeah, with them, it's just a matter of it'll keep getting worse, and that's what it's going to be. But speaking of really good goaltending, and we could spend an hour on this. So I know we're gonna have to be quick and maybe not give it its due here. But switching over to the Metropolitan Division, the New York Rangers, Henrik Lundqvist. We know that this Rangers team is pretty good, but they've struggled defensively this year. Maybe to the surprise of many, but it's been Henrik Lundqvist who has been unbelievable this year, really standing on his head, playing a ton of games already, making so many saves to keep this team in games and come out with victories. I guess there's 2 ways to look at it. One, Henrik looks like he's still at the very top of his game, and that's a great thing. Or 2 is, I don't know if this team against really good teams in a playoff series right now has shown that they have enough defense to possibly win that series. I guess there's 2 different ways of looking at it for sure.
We talked about it a little bit off air, and I tweeted it last night that it seems like Henrik Lundqvist just has heard the rumors and heard the reports that he's supposed to have a drop-off here at some point, because you can make the case that the Rangers will get by on the national narrative by their defense, and their defense is not that good anymore. Dan Girardi's been dropped to the 3rd pair. He's making more than almost $6 million a year. Their offense hasn't been exactly potent, but it's been lucky. I mean, you look at Tuesday night's game against the Washington Capitals as basically the prime example of what the Rangers have gone through. They scored 5 goals on 20 shots. Henrik Lundqvist stood on his head, made 14 saves in the second period, and the Rangers win 5-2. They make it look like a defense, sit back, defend, score at will. And the Rangers, we talked about it off air, they have the highest PDO of any team in the NHL right now. Their PDO is 106, and it's almost 2 points better than the Florida Panthers right now. The Rangers are giving up almost 32 shots a game, and somehow they only have 2 regulation losses. So, I mean, you can make the case that they have been absurdly lucky so far through 12 games. I'm not saying that they're not a great team. They are obviously still a Stanley Cup contender, but they've been extraordinarily lucky so far through the first month.
Yeah, my biggest thing with the Rangers is reel it in. Do what the Blackhawks and the Kings do. Relax in the regular season. Get yourself ready for a postseason run. Speaking of another team that had a little bit of a postseason run, though not nearly as long as they wanted to, the New York Islanders are currently in 2nd place in the Metro with a win over the Devils last night. They've been without JT for a couple games now, though he's had flu-like symptoms. Hopefully he'll be back soon.
Yeah.
The Islanders are a team that I think – I look at this team and I like their depth. I think that they're really starting to look like a team that has the ability to run a few lines now, and that defensively they're deeper than they were. Also, goaltending. Halak has been incredible. Halak has played the best hockey of his career.
Yeah.
To me, this team looks like they've taken the next step.
It looks to me like it's interesting, though, because they've overcome so much adversity or so much talk off the ice, where the building stinks, where the obstructed seats, where it's impossible to get to for fans, where there's nobody showing up to games. Like, they're getting about 11,000 people per game. And it's been, and they're overcoming all of that like a young team, like a talented team should. They had the injury with Halak early in the year, and Halak's come back and been fantastic. They only have 3 regulation losses, by the way, so they're banking points too. And it looks to me like you said, it's like the Rangers, Islanders, and Capitals are going to be the class of this division so far. And the loss of Tavares is obviously a big one. You feel bad because he's such an impact player. He's such a fantastic leader. He's great in the room. The guys love him. And to be without that, I mean, just from the on-ice perspective, to be without Tavares is a big loss. But, there they are, through it all, 17 points through 13 games. They're one right behind the Rangers. And like you said, this team is almost more dangerous than last year's team because they have that experience. And because, last year kind of felt like, they were doing it with a little luck and a little bit of unsustainability. And now it looks like they're the real deal.
Yeah, I think so. And getting to the next team now, the Washington Capitals, I think it's going to be an amazing series if those two teams do match up again in the first round, just because just so much talent. And I think both these teams are so much deeper now that it's like, where's the give and take with the series? It's going to be another classic. But the Washington Capitals have been very good too, though they did not look good against the Rangers. All right, it happens. It's one game. We can't make a big deal out of it. They also seem like a team that's taken that next step as well, just like the Islanders have, that they have more depth now. They're doing enough things right that you really start to say, all right, this team could really make a run. They were my team to go to the Stanley Cup Finals, and I'm going to stick with that just because I think that they've really been better. The only thing, though, is Braden Holtby.
Yeah.
I was ready to anoint him a top 5 goalie possibly coming into this year. Just what
You're
we
not
saw in the
alone
playoffs.
either.
No, and he's been okay. He hasn't been dreadful, but he's been okay. .909 save percentage, 2.25 goals against. For me, the save percentage is more of the telling stat, and that's okay. Really, we thought he was a guy who was a .925 plus kind of guy.
Yeah,
and he hasn't been that yet.
He got off to kind of a tough start last year, and then he basically played every game down the stretch and was phenomenal. And that's kind of where we all anointed him to that next level. He's obviously still going to be the question mark, and he was obviously, I think, kind of a question mark for me when this season started, just because off of one great year and a really good postseason, we have a tendency to anoint these guys and put them in that upper echelon when let's see them do it again. It's one thing to do. I mean, that's where Jonathan Quick has been so scrutinized, but also so good, where he's been good when it matters, and then he tapers off, and then it's good when it matters again. Corey Crawford, same thing. And we're kind of waiting to see it from Holtby a little bit. I think, like you mentioned, the depth and offense, and that's the big thing. Alex Ovechkin has more assists than goals. Did you ever think there'd be a day when we say that? And Evgeny Kuznetsov has been fantastic without him. And, oh, by the way, Nick Backstrom, arguably, I think he's the most underrated two-way center in the game. He has 8 points in 8 games, and he does everything for the Caps. I think they're going to be there. Like you said, bad night in the Garden, tough night for a no-show performance, which is what they did. I mean, even no-show, it just was Lundqvist stood on his head and made it look like a no-show performance. But we're gonna judge them based on how they do against the Penguins and Rangers and Islanders, and they haven't beaten any of those teams yet.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting if those two teams that we just mentioned meet up in the playoffs, and one of them is going to be scratching their head possibly after a series loss. But the next team, which it's funny that they're this far down, but it might be how they are all year. The Pittsburgh Penguins are probably slated to be the 4th place team in this division. Maybe they find their way up the ladder, but I think from what we've seen from them, look, Marc-Andre Fleury has been good, and don't get me wrong, he's been very good in the regular season for years now. So regular season numbers are not surprising for him, but he's a .942 save percentage guy, 1.71 goals against, and he's made up for the fact that they're not really scoring. I mean, Malkin has 10 points in 11 games, but Sidney Crosby has 5 points in 11 games. Phil Kessel's been okay. Outside of that, I mean, Hornqvist only has 2 goals. Chris Kunitz has 2 goals and no assists. David Perron has nothing. He has 2 assists. To me, it's been all. I think they're going to fall back just because right now they're not doing nearly enough offensively, and it's been the goalie. You want to talk about just like the Rangers?
Yeah,
the goalie has been the only reason why they are where they are.
I see. I think I go the other way. I would say that this is an offensively a dominant offensive team, such that they will find it, and that Fleury's almost keeping them in it right now, and that when they find it, they're just going to take off. And I think that's what's going to happen with Pittsburgh. I really like this team. I don't see what other people see when it comes to, the fall off. I think this is a top 3 team in this division. The problem is that the top 4, obviously it's the top 4, but I think they're as good as Washington. They're better than the Islanders. And they're just, you mentioned it. This team is staying afloat despite 24 goals in 11 games. And then now they've won 4 games in a row. You just have to think that they're going to find it offensively. There's too much firepower there that when they take off, it's just going to be a roll. And look out, Metropolitan Division.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see if they can do that, though, because, again, I just think that they're in a kind of an identity crisis with the system here and the personnel they have. But, look, if there's anyone who can do it, it's a Sidney Crosby-led team. Yeah. Now on to maybe one of the biggest surprises of the year, New Jersey Devils at 6-5-1 right now. I think they're on the precipice of falling back.
Yeah.
They have the couple with the Blackhawks. They have a couple games out west coming up. Seems like they're on their way to losing 7 of 10 at any moment now.
Yeah.
Though they've been good, and they've had Travis Zajac is resurgent for them, and Adam Henrique has looked really good, and Corey Schneider has been solid, though certainly not maybe where they expected him to be. As much as they've looked good early on, I think this team is about ready to fall back to the pack. Maybe they're not going to be a bottom 3 team like we thought, but I certainly think they're going to be towards the bottom, and maybe this hot start with just a little bit of smoke and mirrors.
I think there's some truth to that. Their top 2 lines have been basically carrying them. It's been Henrique, Camilleri. At least Stempniak has 8 points. Hard to believe that's sustainable. I think they're going to be in it, and by in it I mean maybe challenging for that 8 spot, just because Columbus was supposed to be the 5th team in the Metro, and they're very clearly not. And is Boston going to be there? Is Detroit going to be there? Is Ottawa going to be there in the end? I think they could challenge for the 8 spot if they get to that point where. They keep getting production. I kind of agree with you, though, that this is going to be – that by Christmas time, we're going to be looking at them as maybe like 6th. Or they might finish 5th in the Metro. They might finish 6th in the Metro. They might finish 12th in the East. They're not as bad as we all thought. It's just, they're not good enough to be a playoff team.
No, that's for sure. And then now another team, the Carolina Hurricanes. They've been much better than I think anyone might have thought they were going to be. They're 5-7, and they're starting to have some of their young guys come around and do all right. I think also the biggest thing is that Cam Ward has been better. I mean, has he been great? No, but he's actually been, worthy of starting. They're not going to stick around either. But at least they've been playing competitive hockey to the point where we can talk about them and they're not getting embarrassing.
The Hurricanes have been – you can make the case that they've been really unlucky too, because they're averaging, they're 4th worst in the sport in PDO right now, 96.3, and they're generating shots, they're generating chances, and they just have just not been able to score enough goals. 26 goals in 12 games is not going to get it done. And now you can say they don't have the offensive firepower, but I think we'll get to the bottom feeders of the Metro, but it feels like the teams that we all thought were going to be really, really bad in this division are actually more competent than we originally thought and more competitive, which makes for a better sport and a better Eastern Conference as a whole. We expected New Jersey and Carolina to be like the bottom feeders of the whole Eastern Conference, along with Toronto and Buffalo. And Toronto and Buffalo are living up to that a little bit. But Buffalo is hard to play against. The Devils are hard to play against. And the Hurricanes are definitely hard to play against. You look at some of their games where they've outshot Detroit, double, 2-1 in a couple games this year and have lost. So they've been a little unlucky so far, and they're making things difficult on the opposition there.
Yeah, they have. It's been a pleasant surprise. But a team who I think is going in the opposite direction right now, the Philadelphia Flyers, they just don't – I mean, look, they were built on having that great first line, and that maybe if things worked around that, they could be a playoff team. But now with Jacob Voracek not doing much, Claude Giroux being okay right now, he's got 6 points. The goaltending hasn't been there either. Neuvirt's been the better option than Mason, coming off of a good year for Mason. Defensively, they're not there yet, and though they still have the young guys that we've been hearing about for a long time.
Not yet.
Not yet. So I think they're in for a really long season. They just look like a team that just doesn't have enough at any area to really compete.
What's interesting to me is, 2 years ago, the Flyers were a playoff team and were like 7th game of the playoff series against the Rangers, the eventual Eastern Conference champions. And I think they had like 10 goal scorers that year. And last year they regressed in that. And you just wonder where this depth in goal scoring went. I mean, Claude Giroux that year didn't score a goal, had basically the same start that Jacob Voracek's having here this year, and somehow rebounded for like an 80-point season. And Matt Reed scored, 20 goals. And Wayne Simmons, led the team in goals. And they got contributions from other guys, from a bunch of guys. But you talked about it off air. Where's Sean Couturier? Where's, Scott Lawton has 2 goals, has 5 points. I mean, Couturier, 1 goal, 2 points. I mean, and then you watch, where's Vinny Lecavalier? Vinny Lecavalier, they signed to this huge deal, and he's only played 4 games. He's been a healthy scratch the rest of them. I mean, that's where the Flyers are just going to have to eat it for a few years while some of this money – they have dead money in Andrew McDonald. They have dead money in Vinny Lecavalier. They just gave Voracek all this money, and now he doesn't have a goal yet. And you mentioned the young defensemen, and they're good young defensemen, but they're probably next year from cracking the system and maybe 2 years from contributing. So this is going to be a long year for the Flyers.
Yeah, I definitely think so. Now, to me, the surprise team out of all of this is the Columbus Blue Jackets.
Wow.
But
yeah,
I'm gonna say this though. I think that this team will get themselves back into contention. I think looking at them now, we've seen enough to say that maybe the idea that this is a playoff team is probably overblown. But I think that the average, law of averages, they'll kind of get back to being a decent team when all is said and done. I think they're going to be a more defensive team with John Tortorella. But looking at it, though, defensively, do they have anyone who jumps off the page at you? Not really. I mean, Ryan Murray's pretty good. Savard's okay. They really don't have the kind of defense that you could say, oh, wow, yeah, they can really lock you down.
Jack Johnson.
The goaltending hasn't been there either. I mean, Bobrovsky, though he's been better lately, his numbers were terrible through the first few games. To me, this is a team that I think that, maybe they had a good sort of situation 2 years ago, and maybe we thought they were more than they really were.
I think there's some merit to that. You can make the case the Brandon Saad team hampered them and made them worse. Their defense isn't great. I think they're 3-2 since Tortorella took over, which is basically it's basically they dug themselves too big a hole to rebound now, and it's kind of the lost year for the Blue Jackets. And it's a little strange to say that on November 4th, but this team is capable. I mean, look at what they did at the end of last season. They went from with the injury plagued, and then they got themselves almost into a playoff position at the end of the year. Obviously wasn't nearly enough, but in this Eastern Conference where everything's packed so tightly, and these bad teams that we thought are actually pretty decent, it's going to be tough for them to get back into it here. Feder Teuton's been a healthy scratch for this team, which to me is a little surprising because you talk about a guy who you want to be a lockdown guy, who they've asked to be a lockdown guy in the past. He's -4. He has 1 point. And he, it's almost emblematic of their struggles. Johansson's been sick, been injured. And it's been really disappointing start for the Blue Jackets.
Yeah, it has been. All right, now moving out west, to a team who has been, I guess, surprising just because we did think they could do it, but I don't know if anyone really expected it. But the Dallas Stars are 10-3 to start the year. They've looked really good, but I think something scares me about them, and I think it's the fact that though they can score, I still don't know defensively, goaltending-wise, if they're good enough to do it. They remind me of a team. I mean, they're better than Colorado of 2 years ago, but the kind of team that can go out and just light it up in the regular season when the games are open and they can kind of just shoot the puck. I would worry about them, against anyone who they'd have to play in the playoffs right now, just because I don't know if they have the goaltending. Niemi and Lehtinen, neither one of them has really distinguished themselves. They almost have like identical save percentages right now. And as much as Jamie Benn and Tyler Seguin have been really good, and even a guy like John Klingberg has 13 points, I still think that this team, they're going to have to show that they can make the playoffs with a stretch run and that they can do something in the playoffs once they get there.
You and I are just not going to agree on this team, Dave, because I think this – I said it last week and I'll say it again. This Dallas Stars team is in it for the long haul. If you look at what this team has done – they don't need, 908 is going to be good enough for them to roll teams. If you look at what Dallas did in Tuesday night in Boston, I mean, Tyler Seguin had a hat trick and scoring power play goals. You look at how this team is performing in front of him. You mentioned Klingberg. I mean, that is a really great top pair they have with him and Goligoski. And Goligoski scored a goal. This guy, he's not the offensive threat, but if you want the stay-at-home guy, I mean, you almost look at him, you almost look at John Klingberg as like, a Brent Burns type with the offense, and then you put him with a really solid stay-at-home guy like Goligoski. And, I mean, we said that everything's gone right for the Canadians. Maybe everything's gone right for the Stars so far because Patrick Sharp looks rejuvenated in Dallas. Now he's playing an offensive role again and 9 points. And Jason Spezza's got 12 points and 5 goals. And Jason Demers, 7 points playing the power play. So I think there are a lot of really, really good players on this team. I think there's some really terrific depth. I think their depth defensively is really, really underrated. With a guy like Yoki Paka, who's been out of the lineup and then came back in, there's some guys there who are really pretty solid stay-at-home shutdown type guys that maybe aren't getting the opportunity because the lineup is good. And you know what I think is most underrated about Dallas is how well coached they are. Is Lindy Ruff knows what he's doing down there, and he's kind of just letting his players play and playing a system that is sustainable for them. And if they need to win games 4-3 or 5-3, which is what they did Tuesday in Boston, that's good enough.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to be right there, no doubt. But moving on to the St. Louis Blues, who are probably the other team, and if you were talking out west, if you had to name the team that's been the most impressive so far, I think people would either say Dallas or the St. Louis Blues. And to me, it's very simple with the Blues. Mm-hmm. Look, they've been good. They've had guys out of the lineup, and they've still been good. That's all fine. We know the Blues are going to be a good regular season team. That's what they do. It's all about the playoffs with them.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost to the point where I don't even want to talk about this team right now because I don't care if they go out and win 20 games in a row in the regular season. It means nothing until they get to the playoffs because they're going to play a very good team in the playoffs regardless of where they finish with that division and the way it's built. To me, it's that simple. I don't care what they do in the regular season. It's about the playoffs with this team because they're showing you once again that they're really good, but they have to do it when it matters.
I agree. I think the question is going to be if the offense is there, and it seems like the goaltending is there finally with Jake Allen. .930 save percentage, but Vladimir Tarasenko has 10 points, and that's best in the team through 12 games. So where's the offense coming from? They might miss TJ Oshie. I agree with you that it all comes down to what's going to happen in April and May. So let's move on.
Speaking of the team that beat them, the Minnesota Wild.
Your favorite team.
Yeah, it's funny. This team, no one's really talking about them right now. They're kind of flying under the radar, which I'm sure is just what they would like right now. The issue with them is goaltending as well. I mean, they've actually scored a decent amount of goals. Mikko Koivu is kind of having a resurgent season again right now. Thomas Vanek is off to a better start than he was. Zach Parise putting up a ton of goals already. But Devan Dubnyk is back to being the Devan Dubnyk that we've seen in other times. He doesn't even have a .9 save percentage. And that scares me too, because again, we're going to get into this conference or this division with the playoffs, and you're going to need to have a guy who could steal games in goal. And the question for all of these teams that we've mentioned so far is I guess we're going to get to Nashville in a second, and they have the goaltender. But Devan Dubnyk has been normal again. I mean, he's at .898 and a 2.59 goals against. That's not great. And though this team is really deep, I mean, and they look like they're absolutely built for a big run here, that still scares me that Devan Dubnyk is very much back to where he was before he joined this team last year.
Yeah, you mentioned it, and you look at where Minnesota's at defensive. Maybe it's almost the goaltending situation again, because Calgary's giving – we'll get to them. We talked about Columbus. We talked about Boston and their porous defense. But Minnesota's allowing the 10th most goals a game in the whole sport. And, we've basically ramsacked these defenses, Ottawa, Buffalo, Colorado, Philly, and Minnesota's right there with them. And they're only giving up 27 shots a game, which means the goaltending just hasn't been good enough. And, last year we had some, people on who said the goaltending basically sabotaged them. And here it is. It's doing it again, only it's Dubnyk, the guy they signed in the offseason to the long-term deal. So, I guess they're keeping their heads afloat for now just because, like you said, the resurgent year of the offense. But they're going to have to tighten it up here a little bit with Dubnyk, and their penalty kill's been a disaster, 76%, which is 23rd best in the whole sport. They're gonna have to get going. I mean, they're doing it the opposite way we expect them to, and you almost have to credit, there's the moves they've made in the past would get the offense, because their offense is basically winning them games right now.
Yeah, it's almost fascinating comparing all of these teams out in the Central Division, because they're all very close. And then you look at Nashville now.
Yeah.
Nashville is kind of the exact opposite,
with the same record.
Yeah, with the exact same record, but they're scoring by committee, where they're going to have guys who are just going to put up their goals and they're going to find it from wherever. And they play really good defense and they have really good goaltending. I've said it and I'll say it again. I love the defenseman on this team. I mean, Shea Weber is the elder statesman now, and he can be otherworldly at times. And then you look at Seth Jones, who's been better. He doesn't have a goal yet, but he does have 5 assists. And Roman Josi, who's actually second on the team in points, who I think is probably the most underrated defenseman in the league. I've said it before. I'll say it again because I still don't hear his name being talked about enough. And they have the goaltending, plain and simple. This is a team that plays more of the, quote, playoff-style hockey that we would expect it might take to win. Will it? Who knows? But they, to me, have that mold to do what it takes.
Yeah, I think – if you look at what you're getting from this team, you mentioned Josi. He's got 9 points, second on the team. They're great at the suppression game, the defensive game. You look at where they're at, they're only giving up they're actually giving up 31 shots a game, which is not good, but their penalty kill is fantastic. Their power play has been phenomenal. Mike Ribeiro, and you mentioned the point guys, Roman Josi, 5 power play points, Shea Weber, 4 power play points, James Neal, Philip Forsberg. These guys are putting points up on the power play. Easy for me to say. Their goaltending has been phenomenal. Rene, what do you expect? 925 save percentage, and this is almost a team that's we expect to kind of float along and let it carry them to the playoffs. But in that Central Division, it's not easy. They're probably going to be a 100-point team that misses the playoffs and out of the Central Division. But they're scoring about 3 goals a game. They're giving up about 2 goals a game, and that's good enough to win.
Yeah, and
Daryl Sutter said it. It's a 3-2 league, right?
Yeah, it is. And if you can be the team that can hold them to 2 and just scratch out that extra goal. There you go. But speaking of another team that is going to be right there in the end for a playoff spot, the Winnipeg Jets. I think they've kind of been a little bit of a surprise too, because I think almost everyone thought they were going to be the team that kind of gets the short end of the stick and they fall backwards. But in a lot of ways, I've really liked what I've seen from the Jets. I just like their systemic play. It just seems like they go out there and they run the same type of game with all their lines, and it works for them. Maybe they don't have the star power necessarily, though Wheeler has been really, really good. I mean, he's more than a point-a-game player right now. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I don't think this team's going to fade away. Paul Maurice is a good coach. They have 2 goaltending options. I know Hutchinson got lit up the other day, but he's been good. And look, I think they're going to be there right to the end. Maybe they are the team that gets the shaft, but I think they're going to be right there and could even be a close to 100-point team.
I agree. I think the question mark is obviously goaltending. But you mentioned that the lack of star power. I think that's only because they play at Winnipeg. Because you look at, Brian Little is having a heck of a year. You look at, Andrew Ladd. They have leadership in their room. They have good offensive players. We need to see more from some of their forwards and some of their defensemen. Like, where's Jacob Trouba been? What's Dustin Byfuglien at 6 points? Haven't seen a lot from him lately. It's just a matter of if they can kind of keep, just bang points, keep it above water. Because they're not a real flashy team. They're not a real exciting team. But when they score goals, they seem to score them in bunches. 36 goals is second most in the Central Division behind only Dallas. So they can score goals. It's just a matter of if they can keep them out of their net. And you said Hutchinson wasn't great in Montreal. And can you trust Pavelec? I don't know.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they can keep it up. But, of course, the other team that certainly, though they are in 6th place right now, I don't think anyone in the world is worried about them. The Chicago Blackhawks, we've seen this a million times from them before, is that they kind of bide their time. They know not to get too crazy trying to win these October and November hockey games because there's just so much more to play for in June. I'm not even in the least bit worried because they're going to be right there to the end. And it wouldn't even really surprise anyone if they find a way to make it to the finals again. Though I think that they certainly lost a lot. You can't not expect anything from this team because they just find a way, and they've had the young guys that have stepped in and been good for them too.
Yeah, Corey Crawford has been quietly fantastic. .938 save percentage thus far. I don't really have a lot to say about Chicago just because, you expect them to be there. And Artemi Panarin, 11 points here as a rookie playing on that top line with Jonathan Toews. And maybe, Marian Hossa missed the other night against LA. If he's out for any long – it doesn't sound like it's any long period of time thing, but that could be a problem.
Yeah, it could be. But I think the consensus is they'll be fine.
Yeah, I think they'll be fine.
Yeah. And, of course, the one team that isn't really fine in that division right now, the Colorado Avalanche, though they did beat the Calgary Flames pretty handily last night. Interesting idea about them. To me, it just seems odd that this was a team that was young and had all this up-and-coming talent. And now they're mixing in Ginla with the young guys, and you're thinking, what is going on here? Are they a young team that's trying to be fast, or are they this team that's trying to insert veterans and kind of play a little differently? That and the fact that I just think that you look at Patrick Roy, and he's just so dead set on the way he wants to play, that it's his team and his game, and we're going to ignore possession stats, I guess, apparently. I just don't know if it's working there. And I'm not sure if they're ready to pull the plug on him yet because I guess maybe there's the attachment to him or whatever reason there is. But this team, especially with how many teams ahead of them are in that division, they're going nowhere fast.
Yeah. It's amazing that you say that because, again, worst in the league in Corsi 4. They're in a division that's hellacious, which doesn't help their cause. They're the only team in the entire division with a minus goal differential, and it's not that bad. I think they're a team that's not easy to play against. That can, just ask the Tampa Bay Lightning. They, 2-1 and beat them last week, and they beat, Colorado blew out Calgary Tuesday night, so it's not like they're an easy team to play against when they are playing fast. It's just a matter of which Colorado Avalanche team are you going to get. Are you going to get the one that scored 6 goals against you, or are you going to get the one that can't put up any points, any goals? I mean, I think you mentioned the young it kind of feels like you said, they don't have a plan. And you don't really want them to pull the plug on the Sakic Wah thing because it's so entertaining. But, those guys are VPs of player personnel. So if Sakic fires Wah as the coach, Wah's still in the front office. So it's a very strange dynamic in terms of that. And it worked for them a couple years ago, and it hasn't worked since. And their defense is they have Francois Beauchemin, who's obviously finding it a little bit here, resurgent. Tyson Barrie, we love. But then, like you said, guys like Tanguay, guys like Carl Soderberg don't seem to fit. Guys like Iginla don't seem to fit. And this isn't going to be a good year for them.
Yeah, they're going to struggle. But moving on to the Pacific Division, where I think it just basically
about struggling.
The Kings just seem like they're going to run away with it. And that being the case, we know how good they are in the playoffs anyway. It almost seems like it's going to be the Kings versus one of those teams in the Central Belt. Yeah, well, that's a question. Yeah, I mean, Pat and I we were talking about this off the air the other day, that in the Pacific Division and in the Atlantic Division, possibly, although I think it's more so in the Pacific Division, that if you finish first in the Pacific Division, which right now we're going to assume it's the Kings, they could play a team that has more points than them, possibly. Mm-hmm. Or it definitely has more points than the second and third place teams. So finishing second and getting the home ice versus the 3 seed in the Pacific will be a much more advantageous spot than finishing first in the Pacific. Because, look, if you're the Kings and you finish first in the Pacific, you're going to play Minnesota, Nashville, Winnipeg, Chicago, one of those teams. And good luck, because those are not easy series. But that being said, the Kings right now are finding their groove. They started out struggling a little bit, but they're 8-2 since then. Look, they're going to run away with this. They're playing well in all facets now, I think. For me, it's just a matter of time until they win this division and then head into the playoffs and probably get ready to do what they do.
Yeah, not much to add there.
No, with the Kings, it's pretty straightforward. But, I mean, you do have to say, though, Tyler Toffoli's been excellent for them. And even Carter has come around, and maybe when people think he's starting to tail off, he's been good. You
can feel the air they exhaled a little bit when they got that overtime win against Minnesota last month, and they haven't really. And they lost the game Monday night in Chicago, and then next night in St. Louis, it was Jonas Enroth shuts them out. So I mean, this is a team that's going to win 8 for every 10 games it plays, probably. Maybe, 7 and lose 1 in a shootout. But, it's almost like the 3-on-3 overtime benefits them the most, because you look at what their shootout numbers were last year, and it cost them a playoff spot. And now this year they're going to win a lot of games in overtime and get the 2 points instead of the 1. So I think this is probably a 110, 112-point team that will win the division going away. The question mark is how they'll do as the favorite in a playoff series for a change.
Yeah, that is a good question, but I think that considering who they're probably going to end up playing, you might have to wonder.
If it's Nashville, if it's Winnipeg, if it's Nashville, if it's Chicago.
Good luck. Yeah, that's going to be tough.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's transition, though, to maybe arguably the biggest surprise in the entire sport, the Vancouver Canucks. They have 16 points in 12 games. And, a lot of us thought that the Canucks were going to be in the Boston's phase where they really are kind of like no plan, no guidance whatsoever. They made that Brandon Sutter trade, and he has 7 points in 12 games, good for 4th most on the team. Is it going to stay? Is it going to be sustainable? Is Ryan Miller going to stay healthy enough? Are they going to get the goaltending when they trade Eddie Lack? They're killing penalties, which is a good thing. They're keeping the puck out of their net, 2.17 goals against per game as a team. Dave, what do you think about the Canucks here?
You know, with the Canucks, it's funny because they've blown a lot of third period leads, but I think the biggest thing for them is the goaltending and that Ryan Miller has been good, and I think that that makes them a much better team. Sure, we know that they are not nearly as good defensively as they've been in years past. The Sedins are going to have to, in the twilight of the career, still kind of be the guys that drive the ship there, but I do think that as long as Ryan Miller puts up a good season for them, they're a playoff team. I mean, really, if you look at the rest of that division, if Vancouver continues to play relatively well, I can't see how they're not a playoff team at this point.
Yeah, you're probably right. Moving along, we'll go down the coast a little bit to a team that started hot and has since tapered off substantially. The Sharks are in a playoff position right now, Dave, but they're 2-4 in their last 6. They brought out the old throwback uniforms on Tuesday night and still got blasted by the Blue Jackets. Dave, Martin Jones has been pretty solid, but the team's really struggling to find its way without Logan Couture.
Yeah, it's funny how he goes down, and it's been such a big loss for them. This team, sure, the playoffs are right there for the taking, to be honest, if they want it. And the goaltending has been good, but what scares me about this team is, what if Martin Jones becomes a little bit more human? Where would they be with him being a 9-1-8 save percentage kind of guy? Where I look at this team and defensively they're okay. Brent Burns has had some very good games lately, actually.
Yeah.
Granted, he's never going to be a shutdown defensive guy, but what he can bring in the offensive zone is second to none in some regards. I think once we see Logan Couture back, it'll help them. He makes them much deeper. They'll be right there. I don't know if this team is going to necessarily have the same kind of tank that they've had in other years, just because there's some young blood in there now, guys who are hungry, guys who are contributing. But right now, they've been a middle-of-the-road team, and maybe Couture coming back will help that. But they're going to have to win some big games if they do want to find themselves as a playoff team in the Pacific.
The exciting surprise young team for the start was the Arizona Coyotes. They're kind of falling back to the pack. And basically this is a microcosm of the whole Pacific Division, because the Coyotes are really not very good. And they're in 4th place right now. And it's been Max Domi and Mike Smith very good through the first month of the season. Domi was second to McDavid in terms of Rookie of the Month. And Mike Smith right now has been pretty good despite the 3.18 goals against average. You look at where he was last year and now where he's come from there, and he's been pretty solid. But, Dave, this is going to be a bottom team. It's fun to see them get a little success, though, at the start of the year.
Yeah, I think we've seen a lot of good things to come from them. They still have Strome in the pipeline. They're going to get a few more years of high draft picks to add to the mix, guys that maybe can contribute, that year or the year after. So it's good to see them doing well in that regard, and that they do have a future. But, a little off the ice issue thing with them is that they have hired I don't know what the exact word is for it, but they've hired some sort of group to help them to find a building to play in the state of Arizona beyond this year, which I think is trouble if you're trying to, really find Arizona as your home, that you're that committed when you don't even have a building, considering that a young team like that could maybe garner some interest in another area. But it's a sad thing if they can't even really find a home right now.
Yeah, it's kind of the story of their life out there in terms of the Arizona Coyotes. You look at arguably the most disappointing teams in the sport, and the Calgary Flames are probably the most disappointing. Dave, this team has given up 56 goals in 13 games. That is absurd.
They're minus 26.
I know.
Only Columbus is worse than them, and Columbus at least has been better for a little bit now.
And they're 5 points out of a playoff spot, Dave. Johnny Gaudreau is producing his wizardry, and Yuri Hudler's been great. Dave, I picked this team to go to the finals, and they still could, but I don't think so. It seems like this is going to be I still think they're going to get back into this here a little bit, because that division is kind of ripe for the taking in terms of that last playoff spot. You have to think that only 3 teams are going to get in out of the Pacific Division, and why can't Calgary get back into it?
I think
The
it's just
goaltending.
the goaltending has been bad. And, I think that it's funny how we're talking about all the young guys in this league and that it's a young man speed game. But you know what, though? There's a difference between team speed and team possession with speed.
Yeah.
Two very different things. And right now, the Flames, though they have a lot of team speed, are not a possession team. They're not a team that drives play necessarily. Yeah, they can break out quickly and they can counter you very well. But you don't see them as a team that really has those classical possession stats, the Corsi percentage that we expect. And maybe that's catching up to them because teams know how to play them a little bit right now. Yeah. They're not the biggest team in the world where you can outmuscle them. And I think that's what we're seeing is that maybe the rest of the league is able to catch up to these teams, the Colorados, the Calgarys, even Arizona really quickly this year. Where, maybe at first you don't know how to deal with what they throw at you, but it's able – once they're not a possession team, you can counter them well enough, and that's what we're seeing.
I think the irony of that of this year is, last year they did it with all the third period magic, but the irony is that their possession numbers are actually pretty decent. They're about a 50% Corsi 4 team, whereas last year they were like a 44% Corsi 4 team. They're kind of middle of the road, and they're just an abomination, whereas last year they were a playoff team as one of the maybe 4 worst possession teams in the sport. It's just the goaltending. Hiller's been awful.
Yeah, I think really what it comes down to is the goaltending more than anything. It's just been abysmal. I mean, 56 goals against. My God. Yeah. I mean, you have the Florida Panthers, who are a nice team. They're possibly a playoff team. In 1 or 2 less games, okay, so 23 goals against. So even if they gave up 5 in each of the next 2 games, they'd be still 20 goals less given up. I mean, the Flames have been like unbelievably bad defensively, but maybe that'll change. There's certainly enough time, but they're in a very, very deep hole. Same thing with the Anaheim Ducks. I can't believe we're saying this, but the Anaheim Ducks look lost right now. It's funny. I can't get a grasp on this team. I hated on them all year last year. Maybe it's because they didn't play anyone that good in the playoff run for them. But I picked them to go to the finals this year because I felt I disrespected them. And look what they go out and do. They make me look like a fool.
14 goals in 11 games.
Yeah, it's bad.
That's really all you have to say is 14 goals in 11 games. They just aren't generating offense.
They don't have the depth offensively. I mean, look, Perry and Getzlaf are good, but they've been either banged up or whatever's going on. Ryan Kessler is not he's not a point guy. He's more of a defensive shutdown kind of center. He's not going to be the guy that's going to propel a line of decent players forward. Nope. He's not that kind of offensive player. You look at this roster and you say, where is the talent outside? I mean, we know what Getzlaf and Perry are. Where's the talent?
Well, they've been a little better lately. They finally managed to hold on to a 3-goal lead, which and it seems like they're starting to score a few more goals. But 14 goals in 11 games is really all you have to say. I mean, Richard Rakell is leading the team in points with 4 through 11 games. So, I mean, Getzlaf had an appendectomy. So, it's early. So, I mean, you got to think this team's going to find it. You see what Kyle Palmieri is, by the way, watching him in New Jersey. He's a skilled guy that they never asked to do anything. And now playing that top 6 role, maybe they're regretting that. It seems like they've got a bunch of guys. We talked about them last week, so I don't want to go too far into it, that they have a bunch of guys who basically are kind of third liners playing their skill game, and they're just kind of, well, yeah, Perry will score enough goals for us to bounce out of it, and Getzlaf will make enough plays, and, we'll get enough goals depth-wise from everybody else, and it's just not happened yet.
No, and of course the last team here, Edmonton, we did touch on them, just so in case you're wondering why we skipped them there. But, yeah, in terms of the Ducks go, I'm not going to believe that they're going to turn it around until I see it because I don't know if they necessarily have what it takes. Sure, they could be decent and maybe find themselves in the 3 seed in this division, but I just don't see enough from them to think that they are going to be a team that's going to make some noise. But we'll see. Pat, we went through 30 teams. That's a lot. We certainly, watch a lot of hockey, and it's great to kind of touch on every team all at once.
I
But
feel like I just had a 2-minute shift there. I'm ready to come off the ice.
I know. I mean, I think we're both feeling the allergy kind of stuff today too, which I apologize for if you hear us both hacking in the middle of this, but go figure. Yeah, so we'll be back next week. We're going to probably have more of a traditional show next week. We're going to probably have a guest on too, which we'll let you all know. But for now, I'm Dave Turner with Pat Pickens. This is Puck Talk with Pickens and Turner. Hope you enjoyed the 30 Teams, 30 Thoughts episode of Puck Talk.